Friends and family of the RotoBaller world, we are back again for the third episode of 2024, the RotoBaller show, the RotoBaller PGA show, brought to you by RotoBaller PGA. No surprise there. So I got my main man Spence on for the American Express. We are going to just go him and I this week. I've had to share the screen with a few guests with him, and I'm really looking forward to picking his brain today about some fun topics. We did some fun stuff last week. So, Spence, how are you doing this week? Let's kick some butt. Let's have a good one. I know it's been a bit of a rough start to the year with the Sony.
It's been a slow start. We were talking about this off air a second ago. Anytime that you get this new infusion of these Korn Ferry players and then golfers that have taken months off leading into the start of the year, there's always problems on the back end of the modeling perspective there. And I do think from a personal perspective, I've probably run a little bit below EV in some of these situations. If you look at the two placement bets that I've had over the first 2 weeks, Eric Cole bogeys 18 to miss out on the top 10 on the par 5. Last week, Adam Svensson double bogeys 18 on the par 5 to miss out on the top 20. So, those two things alone kind of shift this downturn that I've had to begin 2024. But I think there's a really interesting topic for us to discuss, maybe just at the beginning of the show before we even get into anything here. Hitting outrights, these are your words, are very difficult. And they are. And I think as a community and as a space, you kind of have one of these things where if you look out there in the market, people are making handfuls of outrights every single week. And you can pepper the board and litter it as much as you want, but there has to be, first of all, rhyme and reason behind what you're doing. And the second thing of it, there has to be a proper exposure that comes into play with it. So I think far too often, too many people out there are overbuilding these cards with their exposure. And I think when you see the tournament start, Chris Kirk 200 to 1, Grayson Murray 500 to 1, how difficult it can be when you have too much exposure being built. And I might be a little bit of a culprit of that. I went very heavy the first week with a Scotty Scheffler top heavy card, took a stand there. And then I ended up adding a bunch of plays from an in-tournament standpoint on Friday night, I believe, either Thursday night or Friday night. And none of those came in. And it just ended up being too much exposure. And you can see that with my results. Like I'm down a little over 2 units on the year. 2 of those units have come from the outright sector. So I think it needs to be very cautious out there for everybody. You have to realize that there's ebbs and flows in that market. And it's why we always talk about on these shows, you want to have the majority of your exposure in head-to-heads, in placements. For me right now, those have not come in, which is why I'm down even a little bit further on that number. But I think that's how you build a bankroll. It's never going to be with those outrights.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that was the fact that I never hit an outright in the first week of the century, and I still made $3.18, right? Yeah. Because even though $10 of those were to outrights, and I think that's probably a solid way to that's why I think the Breaking 100 article is pretty cool, because it helps people understand how to build a card. Like there's certain people, like we just had Ian on now, that strictly does outrights, where his thing is outrights. Whereas you and I feel a lot more placement matchup. It's a little more boring, but man, it's how to make that fun is to like maybe parlay a few, I know that's not like EV at all, but if you're looking to like get a little excitement, that's what I do with like the Farewell Fiver, is do like I've been more successful like getting pretty close to betting 3-ball parlays for round 1 than like a first round leader, for example, right? Like it's just, you got to just figure out how to go about trying to make golf exciting. And, watching a guy at plus 100, like Tyrrell Hatton, just drive a par 4 and walk away with a par. It's frustrating, right? Like, so outright hitting, Grayson Murray. I mean, you got Keegan Bradley, Benny on. And if I told you at the beginning of a hole that Keegan Bradley and Ben on hit 300-yard drives into the first cut and fairway, and Grayson Murray hit a fucking palm tree, off the tee in a playoff, who wins that hole?
I mean, it's never Grayson Murray, which is what's shocking, that somehow he ends up like. And like the funny thing about that, Byron, is when he made the putt, I was almost 100% certain that Ben On was going to miss. And maybe there was some outside chance that Keegan could have rolled it in also, like the pressure's off of him and he thinks that he can make it somehow or whatever the situation. But like Ben On was almost 100% going to miss. So I don't know. It's frustrating, Byron. Like it's kind of, that's what the outright market is, though. It takes one little shift and all of a sudden the great pick. That's a great pick with Ben On that had every chance and every opportunity to win it. And when they're sitting on the green and they're all putting for birdie in that opportunity, Ben On is winning that tournament. Whatever X% is, it is probably a massive number.
Probably 90, because he makes those 4-foot putts at a 95% clip. I went and checked his like 4-foot range from last year. It's like 94 point something. And then he goes and it just bricks it. It wasn't even close. It was just not even a good putt.
I kept reading on all the things. Like, I understand the PGA Tour is trying to be nice about it. They're like, oh, he just missed. He missed the hole by so much. It was
like he putted from like 15, 25 feet away. It was that bad. But it is what it is. Let's move on to the Amex here and chat about what we got going on, because this is very intriguing. This is an event that typically has rewarded some really, really long shots. And I think, the Twitter sphere is kind of looking like they're doing some really fun stuff. I mean, I won't be surprised if we see another triple digit. We could start the year off with 3 triple digit winners this year, even though we have Patrick Cantley, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, and Sungjae Im, Tony Finau, Tom Kim. Got all these boys playing in the American Express, and it's going to be a fun week. So kind of give me your opinion of this tournament and how you kind of approach it from a betting perspective. I've typically like to lean into DFS a little harder when there's pro-ams and course rotations, because I feel like the game theory is there, but more betting on people playing with jabronis is frustrating. And I feel like it diminishes any sort of edge that we have out there. So do you agree with that kind of take, or do you have your own way of approaching this?
I mean, I tend to agree with the take. I also would say that any time that you have a 3-course rotation that's coming into play, that's going to make the process even more challenging. Like, think how hard it is to figure out and correctly handicap one course every single week for a tournament. Now you have to split it up into 3. Yes, the PGA West Stadium course will be played twice. You at least know the Sunday round is going to take place there. But for me, when I look at venues like this, I always try to simplify the process. I think the easiest way to do that would be to try to find parallels between the 3 courses. Without that, you're probably just throwing darts at a board with an event that has very little rollover predictability. So I looked at short par 72 courses. You're going to get that at each one of those 3 scenarios. Easy scoring conditions. They all land under that parameter. I think one of the significant corollary trends between all 3 properties would originate from the ease of scoring on their 4 par 5s. Golfers who have demonstrated an edge on those holes have typically been the ones who have catapulted themselves up the leaderboard. Although I do think that the essence and the crux of what you're trying to kind of find here is going to be golfers that can provide a total driving return. I'm looking for accuracy, or maybe not in like the prototypical way that you would view that. Like, I'm trying to find short courses, how somebody has performed on easy scoring conditions, short par 72s, look at total driving that way rather than just say who's the most accurate golfer in the field. Had some big major deviations in my sheet with that. And then some of the proximity returns for me were very important. Big increase for me from under 100 yards, big increase from 150 to 175 yards. I think that you have water that comes into play on a lot of these holes. So that kind of goes into that answer. But play out of the short grass, it always produces one of the highest birdie or better percentages on tour yearly when you do that. So at least at the base of that answer, all 3 of these courses kind of deliver a very similar blueprint that you're trying to find here. And how you want to go about that and how you want to add the putting into the mix is another thing, because I think that that's the other key to this equation. Overseeded Bermuda, it's like this very pure, almost carpet-like surface. It's going to be a very little grain to it. I think that that's important because, one, it either can help the really quality putters, but I also think there's something to be said about the poor putters that maybe come in with their ball striking returns. And I'll get to one of those names later in this show, but a golfer that's been striking the hell out of the ball, and now all of a sudden you put him on a course like this to where if he is able to turn the putter around, the upside is there. So there's a lot of different ways to try to handicap this tournament.
No, I love all of that, and I'm on board with everything that you mentioned there. I think driving is important, and then just there's unique proximity buckets here, especially the par fives. They all play in the same kind of length with, long irons like 250 plus and out. I think you got to dominate the par fives this week. Thinking about like Davis Thompson and John Rahm basically from last year, those are two beasts on par fives, right? So got to go there, and then I'm going into this week. I've got 3 outrights that I've bet, and it's a 30-1, 110-1, and 171. I'm playing it easy. I'm going to see what the course offers. I'm going to see what the environment's like. I'm going to try and take advantage of guys that have already played the stadium course and kind of got that bugaboo out of the way, potentially a bit further down the leaderboard. And there's a few leaders at the top that are going to be playing the stadium course twice in a row. And I know that there's a benefit maybe playing the stadium twice in a row, but there's also an opportunity that the first time they play it, they can get caught up, because there's potential that you can go into the stadium course and skyrocket up the leaderboard. It's scoreable, but there's also, it's a double-edged sword, right? That particular course has got the most risk, and it did play it's generally the highest scoring average out of the 3. So that's how I'm kind of approaching the week. I'm really going to try and find the bookies sneaping. And I know it's not fun from an article perspective. I can't really tell the people what's going on, but I feel like that's going to be how I want to dissect this week. And it's the Amex, right? Like, I'm not going to get myself super overexposed this week. I'm not going to have some 15 handicapper walking on my guy's line while he's trying to read like an eagle putt, right? Like, that's just not what I want. So DFS, play all the leverage, go from there, and then see how it goes. So that's basically my kind of vibe for the week. And it's just going to be how it is, right? I think, are you going to be leaning into too many matchups, too many placements this week, or is there a specific market you're looking to attack in an event like this? I know from a first round leader perspective, it probably gets a little better because you can bet all 3 different courses, and it's only a third of the field in each one, so it's like a little easier to kind of find guys that can thrive. But I'm curious as to what market you're kind of finding you might go to.
It's also going to be reduced odds across the board there. So you're going to have to put a bigger risk up. Not that that's necessarily a negative thing, but it's at least worth noting there. For me, it's always going to be matchups at the end of the day of what I am looking for. Yeah. Maybe we can find an edge on a specific course. Like, there's a lot of similarities between all 3s, but if I can find a slight little divergence in my model compared to what I think, compared to what the books think, there may be able to be an advantage that can be found there. But I took a very similar approach as you did in the outright market. I have a 40-1 golfer, I have a 50-1 golfer, and I have nobody else on my card. And I'm going to either look to add somebody in tournament, or, let's see how things are sitting. Like, I think one of the big mistakes some people make in the space, and this is kind of what I've been against always, is I hate going into a tournament and believing that you need X amount of units in a particular sector. You're looking for value. You're not trying to, whether you want 1 unit on outrights, and everybody does it differently, or whatever your total is you're getting to, there are just some tournaments that are not as good as other ones. And I don't want to have the same exposure for a tournament like this, where you talked about, there are so many negative trends here with a 3-course rotation, the pro-am nature of these long rounds of, the amateurs are, whether they step in a line or they make it an 8-hour round because they're all over the map here. Like, there's going to be problems that come into play. And those are things that we cannot quantify from a model building perspective. And I don't think there's a reason to force it. So it's going to be a very, I would assume, minimal card. I have not seen matchups necessarily at most books out in the space. I'm curious to see if there are any mistakes that are made. And I'm somewhat interested to see what the placement markets look like. But even the placement markets, it's the same conversation, Byron, that you and I have had for the first 2 weeks. There's very little value to be found in any of those areas. And I don't necessarily want to be putting bad money into play on something just to force a wager. Like, there's always action to be found. It doesn't need to be forced.
And if you find something you like, are you going to be laying the same amount of units as you usually do, or are you going to just kind of lay half, call it half a unit if you lay 1 unit typically? Is that going to be implied, or are you just going to keep making sure that you have a solid edge, and you're going to keep following through on the way you typically bet.
Yeah, I'm going to go the second route with it. It's just going to be when I release a play for like a matchup, I need a 3% edge when I release it into a RotoBaller article. So if anything eclipses that 3% edge, it will be bet to win, somewhere between a unit or a little bit more. I mean, if I find a massive edge somewhere, I'll bet it up. That's not a problem there, but I'm not necessarily looking to overly attack this card and have 20 units in play this week. Like, I think at the end of the day, it's very likely as of right now, I think between my two outrights, I don't know, a third or a fourth of a unit, and it's not going to get any deeper there. And we'll see what happens in the matchups and the placements, but can't imagine that I go into the first day with much more than 2 units in play with everything.
Cool. Yep. I'm on the same board there. So let's figure out the same at the top of the board. Yeah. We're going to do the fade someone. I know it's your favorite question in the whole wide world because it really sets you up for everything. But I feel like we did a pretty solid job of picking who didn't win, especially with Grayson Murray coming through. But we got Sungjae Im, Xander, Patrick Cantley, and Scotty Scheffler. Those are 4 names that are sitting at 20-1 or less. Which one do you think is the least likely of those 4 to win? Or if you want to say which one's the worst value of the 4, someone that's looking to bet a favorite, potentially talk them, at least give them one option to eliminate from their pool.
So they are the top 4 players, and this is a very similar answer that I gave last week, Byron. They're the top 4 players in my model in projected win equity. That might sound like a standard answer to be given, but that's not always the case. I try to build my own numbers, and only on the back end of it do I really look at to where like the sports books are pricing things. But I think for me, let me phrase it this way. I think the worst value on the board, and this has been somebody that has just burned me over and over and over again, would probably be Xander at these 10-1 numbers. I like Xander. I think he's a good course fit here. There's a lot to like, whether you look at the course history. He's made 35 consecutive cuts. Like, there's been nobody steadier than him, and I don't necessarily expect that blow-up potential to come into play. He's 3rd in my model for weighted scoring. He's inside of the top 20 for me in pretty much every single thing I'm looking at, including weighted strokes gained total. But I think Scheffler is the favorite. I think that price out there is probably fair. I think a similar answer can always be given about Cantlay, that the market is very high on him, and you're always having to get these like 8 to 12 to 1 returns that are gross that I can't get to anymore. But I guess I can understand with him maybe a little bit more so than Xander. And then Sungjae was too low for me. I was really hoping that Sungjae was going to be 30-1 plus. And I think this was wishful thinking with everybody, even at the number that he's out there, that wants to still bet him. But there's a lot to like about him in my model. He was inside the top 5 of all iterations of how I ran it. So I do think they are the 4 best players in this tournament. I think you're kind of picking and choosing your spots here, but at least according to my model, the worst upside for the price would be Xander. But I don't dislike Xander. If Xander goes out and wins this tournament, I'm not going to be shocked. I just can't get there at the number.
Yeah. I'll come off the top rope here and say Patrick Cantley, Xander Schauffele, and Sungjae Im aren't going to win this tournament. I have them in the top 4 of my model. Scotty's first, and the other 3 are the next 3. I just don't have any belief that if they find themselves in contention, especially what they've showed us the last little while. Patrick Cantley, I had him at the FedEx St. Jude's, makes it into the playoff. First freaking hole, he misses a fairway, he hits it in the water in the playoff hole. Like, to me, I have PTSD in playoffs right now. Like, every time I've had an outright in a playoff the last little while, it's been ass. So Xander, just put him in a final group and just watch him wither away. Like we saw that at the Century again, like at a course that he's thrived at many, many times. And then Sungjae Im, like he's priced lower than Tom Kim. And Tom Kim, since he's come onto the PGA Tour, has won 3 times. And he's beat Sungjae out in one of them. Like Sungjae kind of crumbled a bit under the pressure at the Wyndham when Tom won his first one. And it just, to me, none of those 3 guys, they priced this way, but maybe most likely to reflect the top 5 market, to reflect the top 10 market that's associated with them. But I just don't see their win equity associated with their odds it's not like comparable, right? So, and the model suggests one thing, but like if you just eye test the crap out of it, those 3 to me just don't have a backbone on a Sunday. So,
I think we're also both in agreement that we may have them inside the top 4 of our model, but there's not value to be found in those prices. And that's really where the concern comes into play. Because I agree, if you directly compare any of those three, we could push this pretty far down the board, even into like the 30 to 40 to 1 range here. I don't know if you necessarily can trust Sungjae or whoever, or Xander, whoever it is, on a Sunday, if he's going head to head against whatever name you want to throw out there.
Sam Burns.
Sure. Sam Burns is a good one there.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Sam Burns likely is not going to find himself in the mix, but when he does, I feel like I want him on my card. Like, I have faith in the guy. I know he's going to do something. He's going to show some fight. He's going to stand up to the plate and swing. And to me, the other that we just mentioned are going to go out, strike out looking. That's just to me how I feel like they golf. I don't know why we threw an MLB perspective in there, but that's how it's going to be. So, cool. Glad we figured out. I feel a lot safer betting these longer numbers and guys outside with 3 odds at 11 to 1 or worse. I mean, I'm totally okay fading Scotty in this tournament too. I mean, the guy's still not making enough putts to really strike fear into my heart, and no one's going to go to him at 6 to 1 anyway, right? So, let's talk about some guys. I'll just mention that I'm playing Tom Kim. I feel like this is a great comp course for him. He lost 1.5 strokes off the tee last time he played here in the 2 rounds that were documented. Finished T6 still. Tom Kim's strength is accuracy off the tee. And this kind of a golf course, I think, is perfect for him. So he had that like stretch with the waist management in this course where he just kind of lost his driver for a bit. I think those are both 2 courses that really suit his game. And we got a 30 on him this morning. We were throwing that out around in the Discord. There was one of the other guys in there was chatting back and forth with me, and we were kind of figuring out some numbers. But Tom Kim's in. I feel like he's going to play well, especially at the Shriners. I feel like it's a similar kind of a course to TPC Summerlin. So I know it's your neck of the woods. And then we were chatting about JT Poston. I'm interested to hear your take on JT, because I felt after betting him at 40 to 1 last week, we deserved a better number than 40 to 1 this morning, even though I know he finished 6th or whatever. I might just be a price snob and probably going to look in the mirror on Sunday night again and say, we should have just bet the 40. But what is your take on JT Poston and his odds being smaller in a field like this that has, 3 or 4 of the top 10 in the world compared to last week?
I love JT Poston at the right number. I don't love JT Poston at the sub 40 to 1 prices. So second in my model in expected strokes gain total. I think that's the biggest takeaway. That is like the positive return that you would want to see. Also inside the top 15 for me at comp courses, but he has negative trajectory in my model for upside. That's really never what I want to see when I'm betting some of these prices sub 40 to 1. I know it almost burned me last week because Russell Henley almost stormed the leaderboard on Sunday, but and same with Poston, the same answer could be given to him, but Poston and Henley and some of these guys at these reduced numbers, they continue to have this negative trajectory for me when trying to find upside. My model likes them overall. It likes their safety return. There's a lot to like about them, but when JT Poston inevitably comes out and finishes in 8th place and really is never in contention to win the thing, that's not what we're looking for in the outright market. There's other ways I can get exposure to him and feel comfortable. He's a top 10 player for me this week. I just don't know if it's at that price. If you were going to put him at 50 to 1 and you would give me that number, I'm all in. I'll make the bet there. If you could put him in that Adam Hadwin sort of range with it, but that's not the returns that we're having right now. He's being priced as a guy that is in the mid 30s pretty much at all books that I see right now. And the price has gone down from the 40s at a lot of shops. So I just can't get there at the price. It was the same answer I gave last week. Really like him as a golfer. I think one of the big things that people continue to talk about with him, that data golf number that has him as a top 20 player, I think that's really pushing people to want to bet him every single week. And I understand that if you grade out him in your model, he's going to look very good for you. I just think that the problem is we're talking about win equity here, and that's something that is a negative for me, and that's a problem to win a tournament.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, when you go and start your Saturday around 3 over par on a course that's got perfect scoring potential, what are we doing? He should have won that tournament had he not had those 9 holes, right? So Evan just asked you, what does your model say about Montgomery? So I've got this take about Montgomery. I've said it many times. He's one of the most talented golfers there is out there, but he's one of the worst competitors I've ever seen. He's extremely talented in golf. He's one of the best putters we've seen on the PGA Tour in a while. He's an incredible wedge player, and he's got decent length. But if you put him in a pressure-cooked situation, his swing just melts away. And if you go take a look at his splits by round, if you just pull every single round and layer them on top of each other and just use conditional formatting, there's so much green and it's so beautiful. And then there's a little bit of like this red flag behind me over here. Like there's a solid red box that's just super distinguishable once per tournament where he just can't keep it going. And I asked you this question the other day, Spencer, in DMs. How many players on the PGA Tour gain in all 4 rounds of their tournaments, when they play in an event, that have won the tournament? And it's 75% of the time. So someone that's going to be losing strokes to the field in one of those 4 rounds, yes, he's got that upside all the time to kind of bounce back, but he's always fighting a losing battle against himself. So that's my take on Taylor Montgomery. He's a birdie machine. I love him in DFS, and I think he's playing much better than he used to. But I just never – I will put it out there. He's never going to win a tournament unless it's when he goes off in the morning and has shoots a 60 and had no pressure on him, like kind of like Sam Burns did at the Charles Schwab. So that's my tangent on Taylor Montgomery. I'm very firm in that belief, and I will fight anyone that says otherwise.
I think the problem with Taylor Montgomery just comes down to the off the tee and approach numbers. Yes, he's a great putter. Yes, you throw him into a tournament like this to where he has the birdie making potential. And I guess I would give a very similar answer to where there's that negative downside when you're looking for win equity on him, and all of this birdie making potential that we've seen from him. It has been baked into this price. Like him at 50-1 is not the same as him at 100-1.
Yeah.
If he was 100-1, I might be willing to take a shot at him. But I think part of the problem is with the outright market in general is they are consistently reducing every single golfer that anybody wants to back. And they're doing it at like Montgomery can go out and win. I am more of a believer of that than you are, Byron. But it can't be at these 50-1 numbers in this star-studded field. He needs to be 100-1 golfer here. He's outside the top 100 for me in most of the off-the-tee numbers. He's outside the top 100 in all the proximity data that I'm looking at. He's great here at these courses that are easy and short. He propels for me in all those areas, and all the birdie-making numbers are phenomenal. But as you said, 75% of the time, a golfer needs to gain all 4 days. And Montgomery does have a problem that he throws into the mix. I would not be shocked if he ends up being first-round leader and, we don't see him on the top of the board after day 2 or 3.
Yeah. And our boy Ian over here, we will have on the show here shortly, but not shortly tonight, shortly this season, asked the question, buy or sell Chris Kirk at 45-1. I feel like, Chris Kirk to me, it always seemed like someone that couldn't close. And then obviously because we have Sahith, he became freaking the Mets. What's his name? Think of Aroldis Chapman. Like the guys out here throwing $100 heat, and you just can't stop the dude. And it's only because we had Sahith the Gala in the mix. But hey, like Chris Kirk closed out hard, and his ball striking's been fantastic. But then the Chris Kirk of old showed up on Sunday at the Sony when he was right in the mix again, looking to go back to back, and fell off the wagon. So I do think that's a misprice, though, Spence. And I was speaking to you earlier on my show, and I'm kind of tempted to go to him at 45-1 because he's actually shown that he can close out the deal and is playing great golf, better than Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, Jason Day, I hate to say it, Sam Burns, and JT Poster. I feel like he's, even in the small sample size of this year so far, he's playing better than them right now.
I think it's a fair price at 45-1. I would agree with you on that answer. I ended up going to Tony Finau at 40-1, and I went to Siwoo Kim at 50-1. Kirk was one of those considerations for me that I eventually did not get to. But if I was looking for value that I had on the board, it was Kirk. It was, I guess Finau. I guess technically it was Eric Cole, but my model always has him higher than it needs to, and I'm not going to get caught up in some of those numbers. I'll let him beat me at that price, even if my model really likes him. And then, it would be, as kind of, I guess, controversial of an answer as this would be, I did think Scheffler had value at the top, but I also think Scheffler should be a 4-1 golfer in every single field almost.
Yeah, I know. And the fact that Scotty hasn't won more, it's just incredible. It doesn't make any sense, man. But, you know, putts like Chris Kirk did on Sunday whenever it matters. So it's tough. It's tough scenes, but I'm kind of tempted, Chris, Ian, Spencer, wherever I'm speaking to. Yeah, I might go to Chris Kirk and take him at 45-1 if I can find a nice number out there, maybe even a nice 50 somewhere, if that eventually shows up. So speaking of 50s and things of that nature, I have a few options that I've kind of explored down the 50 market. I said it's way further south than the 50 market. I'm going to mention my guy, Adam Schenk, who's at 90-1 right now. And I grabbed him at 110 this morning. Put that in the RotoBaller Discord there with Casey. Casey actually him and I were hanging out this morning. We were fun, like just chilling in bed. I had no work, so it was all good times. I didn't have Wi-Fi at the time, but we were just chatting. And Adam Schenk is being one of like the most underrated golfers there is. Like this dude has been incredible, and he's been on a run of results. I think I brought him up, might have been for the Century, but his run of results has been a T9 at the Tour Championship, a T6 at the FedEx St. Jude, a T4 at the John Deere, a 7th at the Rocket Mortgage, a 7th at the Memorial, and a 2nd at the Charles Schwab. Then he kind of struggled a bit recently, but I feel like at any given moment at 90-1, that kind of a profile, like he's shown that when he gets in the mix, he doesn't quite like whittle away. He just doesn't seem to win, if that makes sense. There's like a difference between not winning and like flaking out and giving up on the day, right? So, and he's 110-1. So to me, that's a kind of situation that I feel like I can palate. So I'm kind of curious as to what your thoughts on Adam Schenk.
Big price for a guy that can get hot. I think that's the kind of profile you're looking for some of those long shot wagers. It's difficult to take too many stands against anyone who's going to be over 100-1. And I think there's some nature of this where everybody's looking for the long shot. And you and I have bet pretty much nothing but, I mean, I'm going to say everybody's a long shot on it, even with, you know, my Finau ticket I have at 40-1. Like we don't have any short prices this week on our cards. And maybe that's the week where Scheffler goes out and just burns the community and ends up winning. And I think that's one of the things, though. It's like, I'm cognizant of that situation potentially coming to fruition. And I would say that you are to an extent too, maybe a little bit differently than I'm wording it, but it's just a very minor exposure. Like you don't need to get much down to actually get the exposure that you want on Schenk there. So I do think that there are some 100-1 golfers in that range that are tangible, that make a lot of sense to consider. There were a handful of names for me that were in that range that possess upside. I decided not to go to anybody deeper than Siwoo, but that was also just from a reason that I'm trying to keep things very tidy this week. Like I would rather take a little bit more of an exposure on Siwoo and the potential that I saw on him and add the extra little bit of the units that I put there than go deeper down the board. But as I keep saying, there's a lot of different ways to try to build a card this week. And Schenk is inside the top 50 of pretty much every single thing that I looked at in my model.
Yeah. Again, it's not like we're betting him at 45-40 to 1.
No, that's like the thing. Yeah.
Triple digits. I'm fine with that long shot. And I feel like there's a bit of value there. Clint asks, what number would you bet Akshay? Akshay is currently 66, 60-1 in the betting market. He's a very interesting profile, and he's very similar to what we mentioned with like Keith Mitchell, with Taylor Montgomery. Not nearly as much, though, because he tends to hang around just a bit longer, but his iron play is incredibly good. And when his iron play starts whittling away on Sunday, because like that's the thing. We've seen him in the mix only at Mexico, where that was a resort course. This is not quite as resorty, I would say. But he struggles to hang around. And now, granted, he's young. You know, that could easily quite change. He hasn't had a long enough career for that to be set in stone. And he has obviously won on the PGA Tour before. But I don't know if there's tournaments like with this big of a pedigree that he can really shine in. So to tell Clint, I would say 100-1.
That's the number I was going to give.
You know, like I feel like that's for me Akshay's situation, because every time he finds himself in the mix, it's not quite, you know what's going to happen, kind of thing, right? So, especially with a bigger field, more pedigree that like this than when he won the Bermuda or the Barracuda or something. He always wins tournaments with weird names, right? The Great Exuma Classic and stuff like that. But why would you say he's 100-1, Spence?
He'd be 101 to me just from the profile that he is in my model. He's another one of those golfers where I do think the price has been a little bit reduced at this point because of the recent run that we've seen. I would be curious to what happens to him in my model, though, when I add in some of the sharp movement that's taken place, because I see him already becoming a favorite over Taylor Montgomery. And like my model is built in a way that if a player becomes a favorite and receives sharp movement against another player that my model likes, it kind of takes a little bit of an extra jump in my sheet for me. So the fact that he is becoming a favorite over Montgomery will probably make that better than 100-1 when this closes. Would be my guess, but just currently where I have things without that being built in right now, it's 100. I would be shocked though, even with that answer, if this got into, I guess, bettable territory. Like I see, what's the best number that you see out on him? Like a 66-1. Yeah. At BetMGM or Bet Rivers or wherever you can get that at. Yeah. Like I don't think he's going to become a bettable commodity for me in those prices. Like the best he could probably get to, even if my model ends up loving the movement, would probably be like 80-1.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And it's a great question, Clint. I like the fact that you're asking at what number would you bet, like not just would you bet Akshay, because just like we realized with John Rahm, every golfer has a price, right? And Evan in the field here said Keith Mitchell should be 60-1. I completely disagree. I would put him right with Akshay because he also incredible. Like to be that good of a golf ball driver in the field, he showed he can hang with anyone. And then he gets right into the mix on Saturday. And then what? Like he does this every single time. Like you can see, you go pull up his round by round stuff, 3rd and 4th rounds when he's in the mix. It's just not there. And incredibly talented. And I will say I will be betting Keith Mitchell at pretty much whatever number there is for first round in a private capacity. I won't necessarily be putting that out there as a patented play, but I think like just for some fun, loving stuff, Keith Mitchell is a definite first round candidate at whatever course he starts. So your take on Keith Mitchell there, Spence?
I kind of sort of agree with Evan. But I get burned by Keith Mitchell every single week. That's been one of my biggest problems that I've run into consistently. Like my model just loves the ball striking acumen that he brings to the table. I do kind of think that what's his best number right now? 100. Yeah. I mean, like even when he was at 80-1, when he opened, my model thought he had value at that price. So he's drifted a little bit at books into the hundreds. Like that would probably be more like, if we're talking about some of these 100-1 golfers that I think have real win equity, like that's kind of right at the top of my list of a golfer that it's a cheap shot to take. Mm-hmm. And I will realize that it will probably 100% go wrong because it does every single time. Even when he's the number 1 ball striker in the week, he still misses the cut. And I'll just kind of stomach that at the price because I do think that his driving ability is just a massive differentiator that he can provide. And maybe you are correct that he just doesn't have whatever that fortitude is to go out and then win the golf tournament. And you kind of need that to when we're talking about outrights here. But I think he's a really good DFS play. I see him right now at sub 3% ownership, and that's subject to change. We'll see what happens there, but he's one of the best leverage plays for me on the board.
Absolutely. I would deploy Keith Mitchell in a heartbeat if he's in that ownership range and things like that. Got one more question from Ian. He's asking about Minwoo Lee. Spence, I'll throw this question to you. Are you going to be playing Minwoo Lee this week would you consider him this week in an outright capacity or a DFS capacity? And if not, or if yes, what do you think in the next few, because he's not in a signature event yet, so he'll be playing quite a few of the next few starts. What kind of course do you think suits his skill set the most on the PGA Tour that will be coming up here in the next little while?
I mean, it feels like the Players, right? I mean, that feels like where he could use some of his scrambling ability. I think any course, he has a very interesting profile. He's long off the tee. He's a great par 5 scorer, and he's a great scrambler of the golf ball. That always feels like a Masters sort of an answer to that. Maybe you wanted to, if he gets into the Masters, I don't know if he's I guess he's technically in it right now.
I have no idea what his situation is because he's 125th on the FedEx Cup, but he's been dominating out on the DP in Australia. So I'd imagine he's ready to rock and roll. Oh no, I remember he is in the market. I remember seeing his tweet. He got like a card from them. So and Evan agrees he is in.
Farmers is interesting also for all those reasons that I've talked about. Like that would probably be more of the tournament than this one. I also think that he will be much more popular next week, which could potentially take us out of the market of having value because I have not seen anybody who wants to bet him. He's going to be very low owned for DFS contests, but I love Min Woo Lee's game. Like I think he's a legitimate top 15 player in the world.
No, he's scintillating. He's fun, like he's an entertainer. He brings the heat, he brings the energy, and Ian's right about the hype man in him wanting to get behind the hype man, Min Woo. So I totally agree. And I think the Farmers, I really hope he plays like complete crap this week and we get a decent number next week because I'm going to pounce on that bad boy if it's out there because I think that's a perfect fit for him early on in the season. Okay, let's dive into some DFS stuff and kind of play a little bit of gourmet cray situation here. Above 8K Spence, let's find a gourmet situation where you are kind of looking to take on a price tag that might seem a little expensive, but you believe that the golf is worth that value, worth that price tag.
I'll go with Siwoo Kim. I don't know where this ownership is trending. And do you have a percentage in front of you right now?
No, I have no idea. But I mean, I can only imagine as a past winner, people want to really equate some course history to the situation, even though it shouldn't be, right?
That's where I'm a little bit concerned that some of the early returns that I have might be too low because I only have him at 8% right now. I would be shocked if he's sub 10%. But even still, if you're directly comparing him to Adam Hadwin, who I like Adam Hadwin this week, everybody's going to want to go to Adam Hadwin. And if we can get a situation with Siwoo where he's 12 to 14% and Adam Hadwin is 20 to 25%, I would rather play Siwoo Kim. There are so many situations in my model looking for those upside numbers that he really pops for me. Number one in my sheet, when I added in that extra emphasis from 0 to 100 yards, plus 150 to 175, inside the top 20 for me in weighted strokes gained total. He is pretty much inside the top 40 in any statistic I ran, including being 7th in weighted scoring. I'm curious where that ownership ends up going. And I guess as a 1B to this, where I am shocked that he's as popular in my model as he is right now. And I just want to give this answer out there one more time because I see that he's popular, but I cannot imagine that he's going to be over 15% owned with the way that he's been putting. I still think Tony Finau is an interesting candidate. I think that the ownership in the 9,000 is going to go to different areas. And if you can tell me that he's going to be sub 15%, I like him at these tournaments where he has a completely different profile now. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Byron. It used to be put him at a tournament where he can bomb away, and that's where he finds most of his success. But now all of a sudden, he's better at these tournaments where he can club down. He's better at these tournaments that have these short natures to them that he's not even necessarily dominating with his distance. I'm curious to see where that ownership ends up going because he clearly seems popular right now, but I tend to think in 24 hours, if we were to have this conversation, it's a complete 180 that would have taken place.
Well, who's around him? I feel like JT Poston could help, considering JT's round about the same price in the outright market as Tony and slightly cheaper in the DFS world. I feel like that could help take a bit of ownership from him. And then he's got Min Woo Lee above him. I think people are they're going to think that they're kind of almost being sneaky playing him because they've been watching the DP World Tour and it's his first start on the PGA. So I think they're both going to be quite popular. And then, we got your boy Jay Day there. It's kind of interesting. So Justin Thomas always garners a bunch of ownership too. So that 9K range is full of sponges that can be easily taken away from that Tony Finau love. And I agree with you, man. He likes to bunt driver. For someone like him, 200 miles per hour ball speed in a Power Ranger outfit, and you want to start bunting driver around these golf courses, let it go, bro. Rip that driver, even 190, just do it. I just want to see him be Tony for a little bit, but anyway.
There are tournaments with Finau recently where I've seen him on par fives, and you go and you look at Stat Tracker, and he's in the rough like 262 off the tee. And I just cannot understand what, and it's over and over again. It's not like a one-off situation. It's happening over and over again. So it's an interesting situation. And I agree with the comment that just came up. Like Lowry to me is probably the most mispriced player in this tournament.
I've got him ranked 33rd in my model. And when it comes to easy scoring conditions, there's like Shane Lowry is a fart in a perfume factory, in my opinion. You know, he's so out of place in an easy birdie fest. And you got to give Shane Lowry a wedge in his hand to scramble his way around a golf course. You can't expect Shane Lowry to roll in birdie after birdie. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, welcome to the party, man. I love that submission. I mean, that's probably the most obvious answer on the board, right?
I have him 70th. I know that sounds wild. I mean, I have him all the way down there.
I would not be surprised. I think there's a few things I still need to tinker with here, but I would personally rank him even lower than that too. So I agree. There's no way I'm moving him up. That's for sure. So Clint says Eric Cole as gourmet or cray cray. I think he's fine. I think at $8,800, he's in a really good spot right there in this kind of field. Elite birdie making, man. This guy just makes birdies like crazy. So we're going to go to a course like this where he's so good out the rough, but even the rough at this venue isn't like rough. You know, like it's this just slightly longer fairway grass, really. You know, like it's this dormant stuff that the only issue with the rough is a tree in the way or something, or a mogul, right? It's not like the actual grass is penalizing you for being in it. It's more so of like a geographical awareness that's around you, right? So his weakness, accuracy and distance, that's the only real weakness he has. I think he's going to, and he's proven that he can overcome that at the Sony. You know, like he wasn't playing his best golf, but he played pretty nicely considering that cut, Spencer. Holy cow. That drove me nuts, man. I faded Svensson, I faded Connors, and I had one other chalky guy that also popped back in because of that cut. So my weekend ended immediately. It went from being like very good to immediately like I knew I wasn't gonna take it. So what's your take on Eric Cole at a venue like this?
17 consecutive made cuts. If you look at what he's produced recently, I mean, he's inside the top 15 almost every single week. Inside the top 10 for me in projected birdie or better percentage when he does play out of the fairway. I think if he can find the short grass here, the upside has been proven, and the price is cheap enough. Like, I know he's going to be popular, and that's certainly something to consider on the back end of this, but I still think he's too cheap. Like, at some point, he can't get that overly affected or negatively affected when we're not talking about a $9,900 golfer. We're talking about a name here at 8,800 that puts him, I mean, what? He's the 15th player in price on DraftKings. Like, that's what he's producing every single week. I actually think, like, I know, like, I think most, if you were to ask 100 people that are sharp, I think most people would say Eric Cole's a fade. You see it every single week, even in the betting market. He's an underdog every single week to every single golfer that he's against. But at some point, the stats don't lie. And I actually think he is this good. So there's an argument to be made that it's working against him now at this point, that he probably should be more expensive.
Yeah, I think he should be too. I've got him ranked 10th right now. So I think I could easily, see a bit of upside tick there too. Our boy Casey asks if JT is a wait and see, or do you think he's underpriced? He's an interesting candidate. I'm assuming you're speaking about Justin Thomas. We already spoke about JT Poston for the most part. And I think having a situation like this where he's a really good wedge player typically, but I think his biggest strength is around the green play and scrambling. And that's pretty much nullified here. Like I feel like a bit more difficult course situation for Justin Thomas is where I want to be deploying him in, even though he tends to play okay on easier courses. He's not like elite in any capacity, but he hasn't really been playing all that well for an extended period of time. He seems to have found a bit of form recently. So I'm kind of curious, Spence, as to what your take is at $9,800. I feel like it's finally a fair price for him-ish, considering the recent form. He seems to have found a bit of love, but I think people are going to glom onto that quite hard. I can see him being the highest owned guy at 9,000. in the 9,000 range.
That's probably the biggest concern for me, is that he's going to be extremely popular. I do think he's properly priced.
Yes.
And that's coming from somebody that has been full fade of Justin Thomas for like the last 6 months here. So I thought 9,800 was pretty much exactly where he should have been. Number one in my model when you look at the strokes gain total on short par 72s. Very good in these easy scoring conditions historically. I could see this being the week where he threatens to win the title or wins the title. He's probably a little bit overpriced in like the low 20-1 range. If we're looking there, I would have preferred in the 30s, but this feels pretty close to where he should be. I just wish we were back to the days where he was 5% owned and not potentially 20% owned.
Yeah. Yeah. And the DFS world is sharp, man. You know, like the ownership goes to places where the ownership goes for a reason, and trying to pivot off that is where taking on additional risk, because people don't want to take on that risk, and that's why someone's chalky, right? So it's going to be really interesting. Let's dive under the 8K range and kind of go gourmet or cray in the 7K range. That's a full freaking range here. We've got tons and tons of golfers in the 7K range. You can dive into the 6s if you want, but is there a particular golfer in the 7K range that you think is overpriced, Spencer, based off of their price tag versus where you have them as a what they can produce for us?
I can tell you who the most overpriced option is for me. I mean, we could start there, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine.
Matt Wallace, but that's not necessarily an uncommon thing that my model does not like him.
Mine doesn't like him nearly as much either. So I've got him around about 80th right now. So at $7,400, I can see that being a fair price. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I've got Alex Noren sitting at 62nd in the model at $7,800. Everyone around him is pretty much 50 or below. So, this is such an obvious answer. It's Daniel Berger. He's $8,000 flat, and we saw 45-1 numbers on him to open this morning. I understand if we were living in a time machine and we just pretended like the last 2 years never ever happened, 45-1 would have been a delightful number on a course like this for him. But this is a guy that's been trying to come back for what seems like 12 months now from an injury. So I'm really curious as to what your take is on Daniel Berger as well.
This might be a wild statement on this. I would so much, if they were the same price and I had to make a bet, I would rather bet Daniel Berger than Shane Lowry.
Yes, I understand that, but that's like comparing a dead horse versus a horse with one leg, right? Like it's like you're not really like giving us anything there. How about I give you Daniel Berger and someone that's priced beneath him, but like Bo Hostler.
I like Hostler, so I would rather bet Bo Hostler. We've seen changes with him to where the iron play got better at the end of 2023. He has been producing tournament after tournament. This could be a big year for him. I'm not necessarily going to predict that Wyndham Clark type of a transition to where like he became a tournament winner and then a major winner, but I wouldn't be shocked if Hostler kind of produces something that puts him more in that trajectory. So
yeah,
with that question, I will take Bo Hostler, but I am not nearly as low on Daniel Berger, maybe because I have a sickness with Daniel Berger and he is finally back and I'm so excited to see him in a tournament that I'm like, oh, well, I mean, the upside's always there with him.
I have a problem with Daniel Berger. My very first RotoBaller article was for the Honda Classic, and I wrote up Daniel Berger to win that tournament. He was 5 shots clear of everybody going into Sunday. Lost it to Shane Lowry, who also got hit with the absolute, like he probably should have, that was like the only tournament Shane Lowry should have ever won on the PGA Tour. And he got hit with like the only him and one other guy were the 2 people on the course that could get hit by that monsoon. And it just was unfortunate. But it was Seb Straka's tournament to ever be. So who do you think is an underappreciated person here? Let's dive into the 6s. I feel like somebody in the 6K range is going to be popping up a little bit, and I feel like I'm kind of leaning into Alejandro Tosti. I know he's quite a popular Korn Ferry Tour guy, and he makes birdies like crazy. So we're talking DFS here. I don't know about, the upside to win the tournament, but at $6,800, this guy makes tons and tons of birdies. And he was one of the premier Korn Ferry Tour guys coming into the Sony and kind of made the cut still. But I think he scored 10 showdown points in round 3, which is, if you think about a birdie being 5, just think about that. So, he scored 10. And it wasn't great, and I was quite invested into him. But I will lead you to Alejandro Tosti in the 6Ks. Yeah,
I think he's going to be very popular. That's my biggest concern.
You think people will go back to him then?
As of right now, and this is very early in the week, he looks to be, I think, the most popular golfer in the $6,000 range.
Okay, well, look at me being a square. I still like him, but we'll see. Obviously, ownership dependent, but yeah. Ian trying to say that we're giving Shane Lowry a hard time. Yeah, those were some solid results, Ian, but that's Europe, bro. This is like a birdie fest. Like, this isn't some difficult course. I don't know what the scores were of those. Come back to me when you've got scores minus 15 and lower for the winners, and then tell me what Shane Lowry got up to. Clint, back in the chat again, asking about Maverick McNeely in the 6K range, Spence. Maybe that's a better pivot off of Toasty.
I think there's a lot of intriguing $6,000 golfers, and McNeely's probably one of them. I thought he's looked decent the last couple times he started, and if he's over the injury concerns, his pedigree is that of a legitimate golfer that should be in the $7,000 plus range. And maybe I always hold on to too much of that, of like what their potential is in some of these spots. And like, that's a very similar answer that I keep giving with Daniel Berger, of why I haven't seen the guy golf in 100 years. And I think like, okay, well, Berger is going to come back, but McNeely at least has shown a little bit of something these last couple of starts. So I think he's intriguing. I think for me, the golfer that I am most enticed to play would probably be Robert McIntyre. Okay. My model really liked him, and you could argue that there are some downsides to this course that don't necessarily suit his game, but there's a lot for me also, like inside the top 25 for weighted strokes gained total, inside the top 25 for weighted scoring. His ability to produce birdie from out of the fairway was inside the top 40 for me. I think his ability to avoid bogey on some of these holes, because that's the one interesting concept here, is you have to make birdie where it's like the potential's there on the short par 4s, if we're talking specifically like the stadium course here, or the par 5s at any of the locations. I think you also have to avoid bogey in a lot of spots. There's difficult par 3s. There's a lot of water that comes into play. I like him this week. He was the only golfer for me in the $6,000 range that cracked the top 30 in any iteration of how I ran my model. I guess the one that I want to throw back to you, because I'm curious on your thoughts here, and he burned me in season-long golf last week, Bjork. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm going to be going back to him. I had him on my outright card. So at 125 to 1, I'll gladly, resort back to him in DFS. I feel like this course, I felt like that was a really good course for him, but maybe he just needed his first crack at PGA Tour golf, and off we go. But the thing about this Korn Ferry Tour crop of players and DP World guys is there's guys that play well in Europe, but man, they come over here and it's just not the same, right? So Tommy Fleetwood, for example, can win anywhere but on American soil, kind of thing. So I love him. I'm going to be going back to him. He's one of my favorite of the bunch. And I feel like this course kind of he fits that Andrew Landry pop gun kind of mold. He's not a very lengthy golfer off the tee, but he's an exceptional iron and putter. Like that's his strengths from what I can tell. And despite missing the cut last week, I think we're going to get 3 tournament rounds from him and can expect him to do some nice stuff. Someone that I do believe will prosper from the 3 rounds that you get versus the normal 2 is Chan Kim. I played Chan Kim, and he's one of my guys I wrote up for round 2 showdown. Went out and scored 50 points. Remember, Toasty only scored 10 in round 3. So Chan Kim balls out in round 2, and then if he does that, he's got round 3 again. So if he gets off to a slow start, this is kind of the way that Chan Kim can maybe find himself breaking through a little bit into the top 20 or top 10 on this course, and getting that extra round, I think, is going to be pretty clutch at $6,200. So he's definitely someone I'll be looking to be throwing a few percentages on in my player pool.
I mean, I know my co-host, A Better Golf Pod, Nick Bretwish, will love to hear that, but I agree. He's a high-end birdie maker who's very strong off the tee. Going to be boom or bust. That's to be expected down in this range. But I think you bring up an interesting point that you do get 3 rounds of golf. You know, if Chan can go out during one of those days and give you one of those 7-8 under sort of rounds, that can be enough to make the final day and propel himself up the leaderboard that way. So I don't dislike that whatsoever. I think for me, though, like for the most part, I'm looking through the $6,000 range right now. There are essentially 4 players for me who crack the top 50. Like that's a bit of a problem at the end of the day. Like I do think that the pricing is pretty solid at the top, which just naturally makes the $6,000 range a little bit worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. One more guy I want to mention, though, Troy Merritt. I kind of like him. I know that, you know, the putt, if you're going to be relying on a putter to get it done, yeah, it's going to be tricky. But I like where his game's moving. You know, like the guy chipped in 3 times over the weekend at the Sony and seemed like his game's kind of moving in the right direction. He's $6,500. You know, if anyone looking at his long-term stats, it's going to be a little bit of a turnoff. I do think his game has morphed into the Troy of old to a degree. You know, I think he's still trying to find his confidence when he really gets close to the top of the leaderboard. But he hasn't been there for a while because he's been playing that bad of golf. So he finally found himself with a bit of Sunday nerves on Sunday and had a bunch of stuff going on. I really don't mind getting into Troy Merritt's ownership there at all. So, and then Jake Knapp, another Korn Ferry Tour guy at $6,800. I don't know. I'm just rattling off guys here in the 68s, but I'm a big fan of the Korn Ferry Tour guys. You know, I write that article and it's kind of looking at Grayson Murray's profile. That's exactly how he medium and hard courses are his thing. It only played to -16, wasn't in the 20s like we'd expected. And he scrambled his face off. He scrambled his face off the whole weekend. And that's what he did on the Korn Ferry Tour. And he won twice towards the second half of that season. So we should have seen it coming. It's not like a shock, you know, if you look back at what was going on, but prior to the event, I don't think we could ever expected that, but yeah.
No, I think the rattling off of the names is kind of the best way to look at this section because there are playable commodities. I don't know if any of them are like necessarily popping off the page on either one of our models, but like whether it's a Bjork, a McNeely, a McIntyre, a Harry Hall, I think Adam Long might be somewhat interesting. I don't know where the popularity goes with the course history that he has here. Troy Merritt was another name that had value for me. Zach Blair, I guess, technically had value, but these are like fringe cut makers one way or another for the most part.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. I'm really curious to see how the week unfolds. I'm excited. I like these kind of events from a DFS perspective because I feel like you can really get weird. I don't like betting on them, you know, so I think we're going to just stress that point one more time and let the people know that. But hour into the show, I feel like this was fun just having you to myself for the first time, Spencer. Looking forward to carrying on these with you for the rest of the year and for as long as we do them. The chat was awesome. I really enjoyed the chat. You know, the guys were phenomenal. So thank you guys for being in there. Really appreciate the questions. It really helps us. We want to provide you with the show. So if you bring us questions, we'll go away from the stuff that we got prepared and we'll answer the stuff that you have and try and mold it to however we see fit. So we really appreciate that interaction. And this is the RotoBaller PGA show. We're here for RotoBallers. So if you are one of them or aren't, be sure to use code TOFF or code Maniac for whichever person you want to support and get yourself 10% off our premium stuff. Our premium package it's loaded right now, Spence. And it's got your stuff. It's got my stuff. It's got both Joe's stuff. You know, it's got the tools. It's got the Discord that we put all our picks in before lines move, before you move the lines. So, you know, we're really looking to grow this community and we want you guys to be a part of it. And thank you all for being in the chat. Spence, tell the people what's cooking. Just let us know.
Yeah, we have so many great things, as you mentioned, at RotoBaller this year between Joe coming onto the team and, you know, preferred lines becoming a central point of the website to all the work that's released from Joe Nicely and Ian and Matt Miller and the two of us. I think you said it best. Like, our goal is to provide content for everybody out there, and we're trying to help everybody win money at the end of the day. One of the things with a lot of the matchups I give, as you mentioned, you will get the best of the number, whether or not the bet wins. It didn't win last week. That's another story to be had there. But closing line value is very important. I know that's kind of the overrated thing that everybody always talks about. But if you are beating lines over the course of time, you will be winning money. You might not win that exact bet that you make, but whether you use the code Maniac, you use the code TOFF, you use the code NICE. I don't know who else's codes are out there, but like, it's not about that for us. Like, we truly are just trying to create a community here for everybody that wants to be a part of it. And that's something that we're really trying hard in 2024. So if you are considering signing up, we hope you do. You can join in the Discord with us. We're always having fun in there. And if you ever have any questions, regardless of the situation, you and I are not the two people that would not answer questions for people if they are not signed up. Always feel free to ask a question. I'm always there to answer for anybody.
Exactly. We'll let you come onto the doorstep and we'll answer your questions right there. And if you want to come into the house, you're more than welcome to. So we really appreciate everyone for being in the show. The chat, as always, like we said, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate that. Hit that like button on the way out, and be sure to catch us next week, 9:30 Eastern, every week on a Monday, for this awesome show. So we'll catch you guys next time. Have a great week.